Empires rise and fall on a line of credit. It is not heroes, nor warriors, not tacticians, nor prophets that win wars. It's gold. Legion's soldiers wouldn't show up in skirts for free now, would they? Money melts morals, and its hot liquid sees the ideologues into a black crust, burnt out and fruitless at the end of their days. Then why keep them? Why be so rigid? Why not be adaptable? Welcome to Fudge Muppet, my name is Scott, and this is the long-awaited Nightblade build for Oblivion Remastered. Slip into the shadows with arcane trickery and stick a knife in the side of those who would hinder your ambitions. We are obsessed with the Elder Scrolls here, and all of our builds have been optimized for great gameplay, but also we love role-playing, and so we create characters with their own motivations and backstory, with specifically tailored skills, aesthetics, and gear to try and deliver a truly unique experience, both memorable and distinct from others. There will be timestamps that break up this video into various sections, covering every single facet of the build, including a guide through leveling and gear, what items to get, tips and tricks, all for each respective part of a playthrough, early, mid, and late game, as well as a section dedicated to backstory and role-playing. The Nightblade is the ultimate choice for those looking for a stealth experience that is both up close and personal and full of arcane trickery. Our Nightblade is a Dunmer of House Lalu, a clan of traders and merchant princes, the most adaptable of houses, friendliest to the imperial regime. They are cunning and duplicitous, a family of false smiles and hidden motives. They speak the language of gold and cloaked knives. The Nightblade exemplifies all the traits of his house and takes them to an extreme uncomfortable for most. He uses invisibility spells, vanishing only to reappear and stab from the dark with a poisoned dagger, and if the target does not die instantly, he then hits them with the Spider's Bite, a spell of paralysis and weakness to poison. Watch as they freeze helpless and their veins bulge as your blade's venom does its work. There will be plenty of more detail in the backstory and role-playing, but for now, let's delve into the depths of character creation so we can begin our journey as the Nightblade. The very first decision we make in the character creation process is race. Each race comes with its own spread of starting attributes, and each race has one of two origins to pick from, which offers some more flavor for roleplaying and comes with slightly altered stats. For the Nightblade, I chose a Dunmer with the Vvardenfell background. This choice is essential for the backstory and flavor for this character that we have created, but with some slight tweaks to the backstory, you could perhaps pick the mainland background. The difference, stats-wise, is that the Vvardenfell background has 40 endurance and 30 personality, whereas the mainland Dunmer has the reverse. Overall, it's just a much better gameplay-oriented choice to pick the 40 endurance, especially since our character will rely on charm spells to alter disposition, making our personality pretty much irrelevant. I've also factored the Vvardenfell background into the backstory, calling upon some familiar locations. The Vvardenfell Dunmer will start off with 40 strength, 40 intelligence, 30 willpower, 40 agility, 50 speed, 40 endurance, 30 personality, and 50 luck. It's actually a really nicely balanced stat spread for our purposes, and I always love the higher speed, especially for stealth builds. Our most important attributes for the Nightblade are going to be willpower, agility, intelligence, and speed. Willpower is going to ramp up our total fatigue pool, but will also crank up our magicka regeneration, which is very important for us because we will be using invisibility and paralysis magic as a cornerstone of our playstyle, so we want good regeneration kept up so we can always have spells at the ready. Arcane trickery is central to this build, and we are left with fewer tools without our spells. They largely define the playstyle of the Nightblade. For those same reasons, we want to prioritize having high intelligence for an increased magicka pool. As for agility, it's going to increase our fatigue pool somewhat and define our fatigue regeneration, but most importantly, it also determines our dagger and short sword damage, which this character will take advantage of. And speed, like I've mentioned in other videos, is A, such a nice convenience stat for traveling, but B, it can really make the difference between getting caught or not, allowing us to move into position quicker. Even when invisible and getting caught is near impossible, it is best to be able to close in on a target before the duration of the spell finishes. However, that's really only an early to mid-game concern. The Dunmer Race also comes with the Ancestor Guardian power, which summons a ghost to help you in battle once a day for 60 seconds. To be honest, it's not that amazing for our build, however, it can come in clutch occasionally when in dire need of an escape. It's a worthy distraction. The other innate ability of a Dunmer is 75% resistance to fire, which is fantastic, and fire is a commonly encountered damage type in Oblivion, especially while in the Deadlands themselves. As a Dunmer, we will get plus 10 skill boosts to Blade and Destruction, which is right on the money, and also plus 5 to Athletics, Blunt, Light Armor, Marksman, and Mysticism. So Dunmer is the choice for our Nightblade build, but if you largely just wanted to take the statistical guts of this build and apply it to a Nightblade of a different race, here are the best alternative picks in my opinion. Look, Breton is pretty much good for any build, and the 50 points of extra magicka for free and 50% magic resistance is always going to be advantageous, and thematically also the Breton fits well, considering that High Rock is a place of courtly intrigue and the magically inclined, great for the work of a Nightblade. I'd pick the High Rock background if doing a Breton for that extra speed over the strength, since we aren't using strength-based weapons. I do think Dunmer or Breton are the best thematic picks, but some interesting choices could also be the Ultima, because they will come with the 100 magicka boost and naturally high intelligence, along with a solid agility of 40. I'd pick the Somerset Isle Ultima for the extra speed. Thornmarsh background Argonians are also very well suited attributes-wise, with 50 intelligence, 40 willpower, agility, and speed. Anyways, alternate choices aside, we have chosen a Vardenfell Dunmer for a mix of both statistical and role-playing reasons. If you choose another race, it would also alter my advice for both star sign and leveling attributes, but after watching this build, you should be able to make your own adjustments easy enough. Okay, so we've wandered through the caves of goblins and rats, and now we've arrived for our astrology appointment with the Emperor Uriel Septim VII, part-time head of state, full-time zodiac quack. For our star sign choice, I have picked the Mage Sign. It's a very simple plus 50 magicka boost that comes with 0 drawbacks, and this single boost is still nothing to scoff at. Functionally, this sign gives you the same amount of magicka as if you had 25 more points of the intelligence attribute. This is the choice I selected, but I have more insight for you and some potential variations. It's worth mentioning now that the Nightblade, despite needing magicka available for all its spells, is typically going to be taking advantage of lower cost spells on a regular basis, as opposed to summoning up one great big spell, meaning that we can deal with lower total magicka pools okay enough. And with the Mage Sign as the Dunmer, we definitely won't be stretching our capacity. However, consider that if you decide to play a Breton Nightblade instead, you already have this benefit of an additional 50 magicka baked into your race, so you could afford to pick another sign if you wished, perhaps Lord Sign if you wanted to just be OP, or rather something like the Thief, which gives plus 10 to agility, speed, and luck. But maybe still Mage would be better for even more total magicka. The same logic applies if you are a High Elf. Typically, you feel inclined to double down and go even bigger with the magical pool as an Ultima or a Breton, but it actually incentivizes choosing some of the attribute-based star signs, because you will still start out ahead magicka-wise of someone who picked the Mage Sign. Either way, we are a Dunmer character, so we get that 75% fire resistance and some of the sickest aura and lore, so take that. If I actually had my time again with this character, there is one alternative star sign that I would consider, and that is the Apprentice Birthsign. The Apprentice Birthsign gets a lot of hate because it gives you 100 points of magicka and 100% weakness to magic. Typically, this is the correct assessment, because really the Mage Sign has the benefit of 50 magicka with no downsides, and the Atronach gives 150 magicka and 50% spell absorption, but with them no magicka regen as the downside. The Apprentice Sign, however, has this sort of awkward in-between stage where it doesn't feel like the 50 more magicka than the Mage Sign is worth getting smoked by mages. However, if you're up for the challenge, the Apprentice Sign, I think, is a worthwhile choice for stealth magic builds like our Nightblade here, because really the idea is to never get out in the open combat, and when we do, spells are really the toolkit which allow us to handle the situation through control, through paralyze or silence spells, or to escape through invisibility. So arguably, picking the Apprentice could be a reasonable trade-off for a Nightblade, since the idea is to never get caught in the line of fire, unlike a Battle Mage or something. So I think picking the Apprentice Sign, which essentially gives you the magicka equivalent of plus 50 intelligence out of the gate, allows us to deprioritize the intelligence stat and instead focus on pumping our agility and willpower sooner. Plus, it allows us more flexibility ability with magic sooner due to the larger initial pool. Now look, I chose the mage sign and the build's leveling has been largely designed around that, but for the most part it's pretty seamless to pick the apprentice instead. It'll be easier on the magic front but more punishing if you get smacked with a lightning bolt. Alright, so Birthsign sorted, pick the mage sign, or if you're happy with more challenge and more magicker advantage, then go for the apprentice. We follow the Emperor and the blades around until we get to the pivotal point where the Emperor eats a knife and we get to pick our class. This is the pre-made class for the Nightblade in Oblivion. It has really cool art. This hooded guy with his poison vial, oh, so awesome. But this is one of the key inspirations for the function of this build. However, unfortunately, the pre-made Nightblade class has a funky skill composition. It has acrobatics, alteration, athletics, blade, destruction, light armor, and restoration. These are fine enough, but they are missing two major essential components of a Nightblade build in my opinion. Sneak, the essential component of any stealth build, and illusion, which is the quintessential stealth magic school. It also doesn't even have alchemy, which the character in the artwork clearly has. It's wild that the Nightblade pre-made class doesn't even have any of those skills, so we're going to fix that with our custom class Nightblade. For our custom class, we will pick the magic specialization, as leveling these skills faster is essential to the core of our playstyle. We will pick intelligence and agility for our +5 favored attributes, and for the major skills, we will pick blade, alchemy, destruction, illusion, light armor, sneak, and mercantile. I know that last one will be a controversial pick, but do know that this choice is solely a role-playing motivated decision, and from a gameplay perspective, I'd probably suggest swapping it out, but I'll get to that when I get to it. You may have noticed that acrobatics and athletics also got the flick. I'm not of the power gaming mindset where I believe in never picking those skills as mages. Rather, it's a situation where we have other valuable skills to pick over them, and we do start with 50 speed as a Dunmer, so it's not like we're slow and need the higher athletics as soon as possible. Also, both will gradually increase to apprentice levels pretty quickly. I do have one gripe to pick with some commenters who insist that picking certain skills as mages is bad or a waste because they level fast, but to me, that's the point. The only consideration that you ever need within this concern is simply making sure that your damage dealing skill is leveling appropriately because of the higher level enemies you face. You don't want to be fighting level 13 enemies with your highest damage skill being 30. But that will not be an issue, trust me. I say this little piece because I'll defend the hell out of putting alchemy as a major skill. It levels fast? Good. I want high level alchemy as soon as possible so I can be making better poisons and potions. As far as I'm concerned, having skills central to your playstyle leveling quicker is ideal because this allows you to access the full expression of the build sooner, meaning you actually feel like the Nightblade build that has been laid out earlier in your playthrough, meaning more game time as a functional Nightblade. There is a great disparity between what looks good on a spreadsheet versus putting the build into practice, actually playing it. In saying all that, alchemy is one of the major skills we pick so that we can get it to 100 relatively quickly, meaning we get access to powerful potions and poisons much sooner. For this build in particular, poisons, like implied by the Nightblade class art, are a cornerstone of the playstyle, and this is supported by other skills like destruction with its weakness to poison spell effects. I'll get into the weeds metaphorically and literally when we get to the early game section regarding staple poisons. Blade is our main weapon skill because we will be relying on daggers and short swords as the delivery methods for our venom. Daggers are a favorable choice, and by the end game I basically only use daggers. However, when your stealth and illusion magic isn't as reliable as it is in the late game, a short sword is a good backup. Destruction is a really good magic staple. However, for this build we will really be honing in on its weakness to poison as a component of one of our central spells, Spider Bite. However, in general, more run-of-the-mill elemental damage options are good for handling those chunky health foes that didn't die to your stealth strikes. I will go over the custom spell specifics in the early, mid, and late game sections because of course the advice varies over the course of the game depending on our attributes. Light armor is self-explanatory, it's our defense skill. Sneak as a major skill is important because it is what immediately gets us the sneak damage multipliers we need for the playstyle. More specifically for us, the 8 times dagger sneak damage multiplier is where it's at. Sneak as a whole will become much easier
easier once we get access to the invisibility spell, however it has additional functions. Its master level perk, granted at skill level 100, actually allows our sneak attacks to ignore armor rating, which is a boon at later levels, especially when we commonly encounter marauders and bandits in Daedric and Glass. This will allow our sneak attacks to be continually effective. Illusion is one of the most important picks for the Nightblade, as it is fundamentally central to this build in a few major ways. Firstly, we want this illusion skill to start off as high as possible because we really need to get it to the adept level ASAP in order to access the benefits of the invisibility spell. You see, the earliest purchasable invisibility spell is only castable at skill level 50, which means we can't use it for spell making until that point. There is one tricky workaround where you can gain 10 renown, which is a combination of your total infamy and fame points, and then access the Joan Stone, which comes with an invisibility effect of the greater power, meaning you could theoretically access this and then make an apprentice level invisibility spell because you know and can cast the spell. But in a practical sense, for this build, it feels like a long walk for a short drink of water. Instead, we prioritize jacking up that illusion skill to 50 ASAP, which honestly is quite easy, pumping NPCs with charm spells as you wander the city. Typically, I'm not a huge fan of sitting around and boosting skills like a robot, however, it is worthwhile in this case just jacking it up to adept level, getting the invisibility spell, and then carry on with the gameplay as normal. I'll elaborate more in the early game section, but aside from invisibility, Paralyze is an essential part of the Nightblade's playstyle, and Silence is handy also. We want to get god tier rich, so charm spells will also be needed. The final major skill choice for this Nightblade is Mercantile, and this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. As will be made clear in the backstory and role-playing sections, this Nightblade is a Dunmer of House Slalu and is quite preoccupied with the acquisition of wealth and influence. Therefore, learning the art of the deal is of great importance. If you instead wanted to make a more tactical choice from a gameplay perspective, then I would swap this out with Restoration, or perhaps even Alteration if you like. Both of these magic schools are included in the pre-made Nightblade class, so it makes sense to me. Alteration would give you access to unlock spells and fun utility things like water breathing or water walking, which is cool for the vibes, but I would be picking Restoration over Alteration any day if it was me. Well, if it was me and I wasn't role-playing a character with the Mercantile skill instead. Technically, anything that isn't a major skill is a minor skill, but for Fudge Muppet build purposes, I sometimes like to outline minor skills as those skills that will be used, but were not part of the major skills. In my case, where I picked Mercantile as a major skill, Restoration could classify as a minor skill of focus. There are several Restoration Fortify skill spells that will be of great use to us, specifically Fortify Mercantile and Fortify Blade. Also for utility reasons, things like Athletics and Acrobatics are always fun. Restoration isn't all too hard to boost with Fortify Restoration, Fortify Intelligence, and Fortify Magicka spells, but we can address that briefly later. To summarize, major skills are Blade, Alchemy, Destruction, Illusion, Light Armor, Mercantile, and Sneak, with Restoration as a minor skill of focus, or if you want to disregard Mercantile as a role-playing major skill and get a little more optimal, you could swap Mercantile for Restoration. But now it's time to get into the early game with our Vardenfell background Dunmer character born under the mage sign, giving us our Nightblade custom class a level 1 starting stat spread of 40 strength, 45 intelligence, 30 willpower, 45 agility, 50 speed, 40 endurance, 30 personality, and 50 luck. Let's get into the early game stuff to get you started. Leaving the sewers, we will have a few priorities. Firstly, our Nightblade character is going to go off and get rid of this Amulet of Kings. He doesn't want to be caught by the authorities bearing the recently assassinated Emperor's amulet. So we go to Wayne and Priory, deliver the amulet, get told to find the Emperor's son, but we aren't about that, at least for now. We are finally free, now it's time to start building up our wealth and influence, and as will be clear in the backstory section, we are going to go ahead and get our revenge. From Joffrey, we can get some assistance and a chest full of stuff for use or to sell. This will give us full quality leather boots, greaves, and cuirass, and we will already have the steel short sword from the sewers. From this point, really the most important thing is that we begin getting those Mages Guild recommendations. Specifically, I would recommend getting to Breville early. I mean, you may as well do the Coral Mages Guild recommendation while you are there, but we want to go to Breville and complete the recommendation so we can get an illusion spell useful enough for training, but we'll probably also want to buy a charm spell that costs more magicka soon enough. Remember, the more magicka the spell costs, the more it contributes to leveling your skill, meaning we want higher cost spells when grinding up those levels. Like I said in the character creation section, I'm usually not a fan of tedious grinding, but for us in this one particular case, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor just blasting everyone we see with a touch charm spell to get that illusion skill from 30 to 50, because it is then that we can go to Ita Rhiannis of the Mages Guild, often found hanging out in the basement, and we can buy the Shadow Shape spell. This allows us to functionally begin getting into the Nightblade invisibility stealth playstyle. I suppose now is a good time to talk about invisibility versus chameleon. The easiest way to think about invisibility is that it is just straight up no one can see you. It's kind of equivalent to 100% chameleon, but not quite. With invisibility, any actions such as opening a door or making an attack will break it. This is not the case for chameleon, but at the same time, I can stand in front of someone invisible and they won't notice me. However, if I don't have sneak mode engaged, with 100% chameleon, they can still make me out. Anyway, so some may think that chameleon of a reasonable percentage is better because it won't deactivate on an action, but I'm here to tell you that it's not the case. The chameleon spell we could access at this point is 25% for 30 seconds. A, it costs more, and is B, far less effective than invisibility at actually keeping us hidden. Our top priority at this point in the game is doing the Mages Guild recommendation quests so that we can get to the spell making altar at the Arcane University, or alternatively, though I didn't do this at first, you could go ahead and get the Frostcrag Spire player home and buy the Mage Tallow candles for the spell making altar. Either way, the reason we want to get to spell making ASAP is so we can make a lower duration invisibility spell that I called Quick Hide. This runs for 10 seconds, and the reason we want it to be a lower duration and therefore lower cost is because through the course of actual stealth gameplay, we will often be opening doors or making stealth attacks and therefore breaking invisibility. By lowering the cost of the invisibility spell, it is harmless to reapply this as needed rather than having a 30-second duration spell which will be broken often and leaves you with less usable magicka because of its larger cost. As you can see, the Quick Hide spell method gives you way more freedom as to when you apply the invisibility and more control over your magicka pool. Also, let it be known that invisibility essentially makes you a master of stealth. Even master rank stealth alone cannot replicate the effectiveness of actually being invisible. Okay, so we know spellmaking and invisibility is a Nightblade's top priority. We have plenty of other spells to talk about for this early game section, but let me first discuss the leveling of attributes. At our first level up, I put +5 into both intelligence and agility, bringing those up to 50 each. The remainder +2 points went into willpower. I essentially repeated this same process throughout the entire early game section. At level 10, what I consider to be the end of the early game, we have 40 strength, 90 intelligence, 48 willpower, 90 agility, 50 speed, 40 endurance, 30 personality, and 50 luck. This leaves us in a very good position to enter the mid game with lots of foundational spellcasting potential established. Speaking of spellcasting, there are some really important custom spells to discuss for the early game section. There is Quick Hide, a low-cost 10-second invisibility spell, like I mentioned, which will be our essential spell for the playstyle. But as I mentioned in character creation, we have alchemy skills also. Alchemy is such a diverse skill with many niche applications, but the bread and butter usage of this skill certainly will be damage, health, poisons. My go-to region for these ingredients is this entire region of the West Weald between Breville and Skingrad, as well as all around Skingrad and towards Kvatch. In these areas, you will find abundant nightshade and peonies, both of which can be used in the creation of damage, health, poisons. You will also, in the West Weald area between Skingrad and Breville, find several bodies of water where you can harvest lotus seeds, which can also be used. These can also be reliably harvested from the little water spots in the Imperial City. Outside of these ingredients found along these tracts of land, you can also use Harada root and spittle sticks found in the plains of Oblivion, wisp stalk caps found found in caves, and Stinkhorn, which is found in the Blackwood region mainly. All of these provide reliable staple ingredients for damage health poisons which can be applied to pretty much every single one of our weapon strikes. There are far more advanced and complex poisons to be made as well, but the simple damage health is a good, accessible, and plentiful staple. I had to bring all that up now to provide context for one of our best custom spells for the early game. Firstly, we'll need to get the Paralyze spell through purchasing one, which we can do buying Debilitate from Ito Rienis, the same person that you got Shadow Shape from. You will also need to buy Weakness to Poison, which can be purchased from Ungarion. This custom spell I call Spider Bite, and it's designed for low cost and maximum interruption. It paralyzes on touch for 1 second, which is annoying enough, tumbling an enemy, making them waste time getting back on their feet, but it also gives them a 100% weakness to poison for 10 seconds, which functionally means double damage for our poisons. So those early game poisons of 3 or 4 damage per second for 10 or 12 seconds become 6 or 8 damage per second for the same duration. And remember that poisons stack, so that if I apply one poison and strike, and then another and strike again, they both affect the foe. Altogether, that can mean 12 or 16 damage per second. So we'll always keep our blade lacquered in poison, but if we fail to kill them on the first strike and we are thrust into open combat, we hit them with the Spider Bite spell. They drop to the ground and suffer a slow death. You can also pull this off in the reverse, simply paralyzing them straight away and immediately striking. It's often possible to still get that stealth attack. Make sure you have the poisons hotkeyed so we can reapply as much as we need in combat. This cheap paralysis spell is a handy foil to melee opponents, allowing us to control the battle and be what is probably the most annoying enemy to face. As we progress in the game, we can afford to make the paralysis effect even greater, and you can add additional effects like damage and such. However, I will say, be wary of adding too many effects and jacking up the magicka cost, because the greatest utility of the spell is that it will constantly interrupt enemy targets. If we can't cast it as much, we can't interrupt them as much. We will be engaging in a ton of spell making, and that costs money, so the sooner we make these following spells, the better. I made a simple 100-point charm spell which lasts for 8 seconds called Hlalu Charm. To be honest, I could have made it for an even shorter duration because the best thing about getting into dialogue is that it pauses the game world, meaning the timer for spells as well. Meaning that if we made the spell for 2 seconds, say, cast it on an NPC and then quickly get into conversation, it will last for the entire duration of the dialogue. This spell is incredibly handy, just insta-raising the disposition of anyone we talk to, using deceptive illusion magic to get the information we want. But the second and much grander purpose for the charm spell is to alter the disposition for the sake of haggling for better prices. Even at novice level restoration, we can also make a Fortify Mercantile spell for 60 points for 2 seconds, once again using it just before dialogue, and functionally the buff will last for the entire bartering session. I called my Fortify Mercantile spell Hlalu Grease, to grease the wheels a little and get the deal going in my favor. The Fortify skill effect can be acquired easily and for free by getting the Master's Hand power from the Tower Stone located just across the lake from the Imperial City waterfront. These two spells, used in conjunction, are going to be essential for accumulating riches early, which is right on theme for our character, and it has many practical applications, giving us a ton of disposable income for buying alchemy ingredients and making spells, as well as buying real estate. Like I said, one of the role-playing vibes for this character was to get very rich and influential, so this was key. The spell making will get more varied later on, but for now, in this early game section, these 4 spells, Quick Hide, Spider Bite, Hlalu Charm, and Hlalu Grease will get you into the core of the playstyle soon enough. But let's talk more about factions. This character is a stealth build, a Nightblade, and so far we've only really talked about the Mages Guild, getting those recommendations and gaining access to the Arcane University. Well, we also want to be pursuing both the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood. The Thieves Guild in particular will be useful for accumulating gold, however this will go most smoothly after we've acquired the Skeleton Key at level 10. However, we really do want to be joining the Dark Brotherhood in these early levels, so at some point between the recommendations and for role-playing reasons, we will want to travel to this location called Walker Camp, and it is here that we will straight up murder these 2 Kumano Tong members and get our revenge. Obviously, I will elaborate on this in the backstory and role-playing sections, but for now, in gameplay purposes alone, this is an easy 2 murders with no guards about, and it provides a great gateway into the Dark Brotherhood questline. Speaking of which, joining the Dark Brotherhood is going to to set us up with the Shrouded Armor and Hood, which is a very light and valuable set of light armor with some neat enchantments, skill boosts to things that we use like Sneak, Illusion, and Blade. Throughout the course of the Dark Brotherhood, we'll also get some very nice gear. The second contract we receive is to kill Balin in Bruma. If completed successfully, it will come with the bonus reward of the enchanted elven dagger called Sufferthorn. It is a leveled item, so it's worth waiting until level 5 so we can get the level 5 to 9 version because it has a damage health of twice the level 1 to 4 version. The version we get will drain strength by 5 points and damage health by 10 points, but overall this becomes a really great early game dagger choice. So to recap the early game section, you will have pumped your illusion to 50 by spamming NPCs with charm spells, then you from Itarianus can buy Shadow Shape. Go do the recommendations for the Mages Guilds, get to the Spellmaking Altar, make custom spells we just spoke about, join the Dark Brotherhood and get yourself kitted out with the Shrouded Armor and Sufferthorn for the dagger. Your level 10 stats will be 40 Strength, 90 Intelligence, 48 Willpower, 90 Agility, 50 Speed, 40 Endurance, 30 Personality, and 50 Luck. As I mentioned at the start of the video, we here at Fudge Muppet love roleplaying, creating backstories and motivations for a character, as well as making aesthetic decisions that create a certain gaming experience that is distinct from others. We seek a perfect blend of form and function, meaning cool builds that also play really well. We aren't always going to go for builds that are just about min-maxing and being overpowered, though if we can, we'll always try and make them as powerful as possible while maintaining roleplay integrity. But I digress. I thought that now that you understand the foundational parts of character creation and the early game leveling, as well as the fundamentals of the build, I figured now would be a good time to talk about role-playing, factions, and backstory, something you can listen to while you get your character through those initial levels, perhaps while you're training up your illusion. So without further ado, let's get into the backstory, and then after we will see how this informs the role-playing and quest choices before rolling on to the mid and late game leveling. It was the 12th of Rain's Hand, year 410 of the Third Era, when Savos Hlalu graced the world with his golden smile for the first time. His father, Relan Hlalu, and mother, Savura Hlalu, raised their youngest child in Narcissus for a brief 4 years before Relan was assigned to Vardenfell, where he would be the representative of House Hlalu in the Grand Council at Ebonheart. Savos Hlalu was raised primarily in Ebonheart, the seat of imperial authority in Vardenfell, and secondarily in Vivec, where he spent many months in the Hlalu canton. And at times he would, with his family, visit other Hlalu settlements, Balmora, Suran, and so on. In his youth, he became intimately familiar with all of Vardenfell and its political complexities. He was well educated and had the best tutors that septums could buy. An ex-ordinator schooled the boy in swordsmanship, an imperial battle mage taught him what he knows of illusion and destruction magics, and as for the art of the deal, well, what better mentor can you have than the cunning minds of House Hlalu? A childhood's a childhood, nothing special in Savos's case, that is aside from the wealth and the prestige of his family name. But his problems would not begin until he came of age. The 5th century of the Third Era was a troubling time for Morrowind. The year he turned 17, the province of Morrowind was flipped on its head. The Nerevarine prophecy came true and thousands of years of tribunal dogma was overturned in but months. Sotha Sil was murdered by Almalexia, she killed by the Nerevarine, and soon after Vivec vanished from Nirn itself. The Dunmer people were for the first time without their living gods. Imperial power was growing, the houses were in unrest. Indoril in particular was having the meltdown of a millennia. But there was House Hlalu, slipping its fingers into the right places, shaking the right hands, securing their monopoly where they could. They always were the most adaptable of the houses. As Savos came of age during this turmoil, he developed into quite the shrewd salesman of cunning and calculation. He leveraged the chaos, buying up lands and mines all up the Bitter Coast for absurdly good prices as House Redoran receded in territory. He did this on his father's behalf, of course. Though he was not a fool, he hid some acquisitions for his own, an insurance policy. You see, Savos had long lived in the shadow of his brother, 15 years his senior, Velas Hlalu. Their father favoured the eldest. He was prudent, reliable, and safe. Savos, on the other hand, was born with a silver tongue, a golden smile, and a keen intellect, a dangerous combination resulting in a mind that bubbled with all kinds of ambitious plots and grander desires. His father held an important position as the representative of House Slalu at the Grand Council, and when he discovered Savos's hidden acquisitions, he grew concerned. Even more concerning, Relin discovered that his youngest son had been in contact with the Commoner Tong, a criminal syndicate characterized by xenophobia, and also that he had several dealings with Orvis Dren, their kingpin. He confirmed this through several contacts in his spy network, and desperate to preserve all that he built, to preserve his reputation, Relin resorted to the Morag Tong and organized a writ on his very own son. One evening at their estate on the Ascadian Isles, their lantern-lit family dinner was suddenly interrupted when a Morag Tong assassin, adorned in drapery inked with the symbolism of Black Hand's Mafala, entered the dining room. House servants backed to the walls and visiting cousins scrambled back from their chairs, so eager to distance themselves from their host. Savos slowly turned to his father, taunting him with a golden smile. How was he so calm in the face of death? Relin thought. And that is when Relin realized that the assassin was not here for Savos. He had been outsmarted. Moments later, it was his father's blood seeping from his neck, decorating the dining hall in a pool of crimson. Savos kicked up his feet and poured himself a glass of Cyrodiilic brandy, watching the life leave his father's glaring eyes. Don't worry, father. I'll take care of it. As it turns out, Savos had been 2 steps ahead. He had intercepted the message to the Morag Tong and carefully altered its contents. Apparently, Vela Slalu had placed a hit on his father with the Tong. How scandalous! The rest of House Slalu functionally excommunicated Velas, and not long after, Savos would read a eulogy at his brother's funeral, tragically found dead in a skooma den. Savos quickly assumed control of his father's estate. He had control of the narrative and the love of a grieving mother, with only her youngest son left. Left to his own devices, Savos grew more ambitious, greedy even, but slowly he caught the ire of the rest of his house. It was the year 433, and Savos had deepened his connections with the Commoner Tong, and while he did not truly share any of their motives, he did enjoy their connections and financial advantages. Savos Slalu was not one afraid to play both sides of the aisle. In this year, he had been given the honourable task by the Grand Master of House Slalu, Duke Vadum Dren, to go to the Imperial City and advocate for several adjustments to the trade mandates regarding ebony from Vardenfell. Savos was obligated to abide the request of the Duke, and he set out for Cyrodiil with 2 Commoner Tong bodyguards recommended to him by the Duke's brother, Orvis Dren, the kingpin of the Commoner Tong. When they arrived in the Imperial City, Savos was keen to try the wine and the women, and soon he found himself in a private room of red velvet and debellite dancers. The night stretched long and grew dizzy with goblet after goblet of West-wheeled wine, but then the shock of his life occurred when his Commoner Tong bodyguards entered the room, subdued Savos with a paralysis poison, and murdered the 3 courtesans, bludgeoning them to death in front of his eyes. Then Savos was knocked out cold, awaking in the early hours of the morning, surrounded by 3 corpses and covered in their blood, murder weapons in his hands. The Legion Guard burst into the room only moments later. Savos was dragged to the Imperial City prison and arrested on 3 counts of murder. He was doomed for execution. Savos had several days to think over the events in that dark, damp cell. Where did he go wrong? He couldn't know for sure yet, but his best theory was that Orvis Dren was forced to betray him, or more likely, willingly did a favor for his brother, the Duke, in order to gain leverage on him. It didn't matter now. Savos had to figure out how to get out of his cell. And well, sometimes life just works out the way you want it to. As it turns out, the Emperor Uriel Septim was escaping assassination through Savos' very cell, leading to the Nightblade's escape from prison. If it wasn't clear by the backstory, Savos Slalu is cunning and conniving, willing to do anything to achieve his goals. With a golden smile and a silver tongue, as well as an arsenal of arcane trickery, Savos Slalu will and has done many devious deeds to establish himself in the hierarchy of the world. After his father attempted to place a writ on him, Savos drastically shifted shifted in perspective, becoming far more suspicious of others' motives, even those close to him. But he would not truly learn his lesson until he was betrayed by the commoner Tong at the brothel. From this point on, Savos Slalu, the Nightblade, borderlines on paranoia as he makes sure he maintains leverage at all times, whether that be through political influence, underground connections, or just piles of gold. He will deepen his knowledge of the arcane, developing new illusion spells in new forms of deception, always staying ahead of his enemies and his friends. Leaving the prison, Savos will be keen to get rid of this hot property that is the Amulet of Kings. He is not a fool, and being framed for murdering some prostitutes is enough. He doesn't need the death of the Emperor on his ticket as well. He will quickly rid himself of the Amulet of Kings, taking it to Joffrey. He will be tempted many times on his way to Wayne and Priory to just ditch the thing, but something compels him, whether it's a sense of awe or fate. He just can't throw it away. Joffrey will accept the care of the Amulet of Kings and entrust Savos with seeking out the bastard son of Uriel Septim. The Golden Smile, of course, comes out and Savos accepts this mission, along with a chest full of goods as assistance, but as soon as he leaves that priory, all thoughts of some retrieval mission leave his mind, and he sets about on his own quest for power. Firstly, he will join the Mages Guild to establish himself an identity as an associate. With the Mages Guild, he will have a place to sleep and the resources afforded by the guild. He will travel around Cyrodiil gathering recommendations from each of the guild halls, and from a role-playing angle, I like the idea that his developing paranoia keeps him moving, never staying in one place for too long, always cautious of being watched or being caught with a regular schedule. I explained in the early game section the reasons for doing the Mages Guild recommendations and the spellmaking and such, but now we also have more clarity on the commoner Tong situation. I like to roleplay that when Savos is in Cheydinhal, there for the Mages Guild recommendation, he's going to overhear about two commoner Tong thugs who were causing a commotion in the Newlands Lodge yesterday. So Savos knows that these were his bodyguards, and he will ask after them and track them down to the Walker camp. And there he will brutally murder them and get his revenge. This also in gameplay terms means that we've committed a murder, meaning the Dark Brotherhood will soon contact us. Speaking of which, let's talk factions. The three main factions for this Nightblade character are the Mages Guild, Thieves Guild, and the Dark Brotherhood. The three motivations that sort of cross over here are influence, wealth, and power, each of which these guilds deliver in various ways. Becoming the Archmage of the Mages Guild is going to afford Savos Slalu a level of great public face prestige and a ton of magical resources. The Thieves Guild is going to provide him with an expansive network of eyes and ears, giving him control of an important faction in the criminal underworld, and he also likes the idea of controlling a faction which has historically been at odds with the commoner Tong, whom he now holds a grudge against for their betrayal. Becoming listener of the Dark Brotherhood is also a great advantage, meaning he effectively controls a cult of assassins fanatically devoted to the art of murder, a useful faction to control for his future plans. Speaking of which, this entire playthrough is really seen through the lens of someone trying to acquire as much power and influence as he can for their own sake, but also to enact his revenge on whomever was involved in his betrayal. One day he will return to Morrowind to reclaim his old holdings, and he will do so with the Imperial seal of approval. One day he will kill the Drens, both the Duke and his kingpin brother. But of course, since the game Oblivion is restrained to Cyrodiil, we will never see this goal come into fruition. However, while as in Cyrodiil, Savos can come far. Part of the role-playing will involve amassing wealth and treasures, as well as personal power, as much leverage as he can. Doing any Daedric quest will be easy for Savos because, as outlined in the intro for this video, his morals are very flexible. Why hold such rigid distinctions? Adaptability is the aim of the game. Also, the Daedric artifacts make great trophies for your houses. That's right, houses. Multiple houses fits very well into the role-playing, especially with the kind of paranoia angle going on. Frostcrag Spire is a good remote home, and having some kind of house or base in every city, always keeping his enemies guessing, is a good move. But his favourite house from a pure self-enjoyment perspective is going to be the Rosethorn Manor of Skingrad. It gives a certain air of luxury and refinement that is right up Savos' alley. It's also worth noting that the Shivering Isles will be a fun little adventure for him in the late game. Perhaps he will become the Duke of Dementia. I like the idea that his greed and paranoia becomes almost a form of madness in itself. Perhaps so much so that he becomes the very mad god. That is a form of power that he would certainly like. Ultimately, my final note for role-playing would be to keep this character's personality at the forefront of his mind. He is deeply untrusting and suspicious of others while simultaneously being very charming and confident in his interactions. Even in playing the main quest, eventually you can come at it from a perspective of gaining influence with what will be Tamriel's next emperor, a friends in high places kind of angle. In general, don't be afraid of betraying those that you can afford to. Don't necessarily make enemies, but if you can advantage yourself at the cost of someone else and still get away with it, then why not? It goes without saying that this character, it's not exactly a good guy, but hey, I guess even the devils have their moments. Alright, so now you have a really good grasp of the character on both a gameplay level and a role-playing level. It's now time to get into the mid-game leveling. This is where we're going to see the full expression of our build take place. We have had our revenge and are now solely devoted to the pursuit of power and influence. We will be working our way through the Dark Brotherhood contracts, as well as furthering our position in the Thieves and Mages Guild. At level 10, I think it's important to go ahead and get the Skeleton Key from Nocturnal's Daedric quest. It's easily accessible and it makes the Thieves Guild questline go a lot more smoothly. But before we get into what to do, let's outline the leveling for these mid-game levels of 11 to 20. At level 11, we put +5 into intelligence and agility, and we bring our willpower to 50 with another +2. At level 12, we'll put those final +5s into intelligence and agility, bringing those both to 100, and we dump the +2 into strength, mainly because we want to start getting more carry weight. We are now going to begin a new pattern of putting +5 into willpower and speed with the +2s into strength. By level 16, your willpower and speed will be 70 each, and your strength will be 50. We can now switch it up a little bit again because speed is 70 and fast enough for our current needs. We start putting +5s into endurance at each level, and of course the other +5s still into willpower, with the +2s still into strength. At level 20, your stats should be 58 strength, 100 intelligence, 90 willpower, 100 agility, 70 speed, 60 endurance, 30 personality, and 50 luck. But let's get a little more into the details of this stage of the playthrough. Around the level 12 to 14 mark, I took on the Repairing the Ori quest from Bothiel in the Arcane University, and one of the key reasons I did this, outside of just wanting to see the Dwemer Ori and its Unreal 5-engine glory, is that it requires you to track down the several Dwemer parts and clear out several camps of bandits, and for whatever reason, they pretty reliably have a ton of good leveled gear, and plenty of it was enchanted. I've tried this on a few builds, and I've either just gotten really lucky, or they're supposed to have very good gear. But basically, I left those camps with a full set of mithrils, some of which was enchanted, including a cuirass with Fortify health of 20 points, and greaves of fire resistance of 20%, which as a Dunmer makes me 95% resistant to fire, which is pretty cool. I also got a Ring of Intelligence, boosting it by 6, and I was also wearing the Black Band for the Dark Brotherhood questline, plus I also had an Amulet of Spell Absorption that I found, giving 20 points of spell absorption, which was a pretty great find. Now, look, I obviously can't guarantee any of these items, but it was a good quest to do, so I could give my character a visual upgrade and find a bunch of enchanted gear. However, what I can guarantee is that your mercantile skill will be 50. If you've been selling and making that gold, and so certain vendors will sell specialty items. At Divine Elegance in the Imperial City Market District, you can buy the Quicksilver Boots, which is a pair of glass boots that boosts agility and speed by 10 points and drains light and heavy armor by 5 points. A very easy trade-off to make. This is one nice piece for our character as well, and it fits in with a glass set that we'll eventually be pursuing in the late game. In saying that, the pursuit of glass armor and glass weaponry, dagger and short sword, is also a good idea. But I gotta be honest, I skip on the helmet. I feel like a hood or even just some sort of Agent 47 type bald head looks really cool for this character. At level 15, it's worth noting that you can do Mephila's Daedric quest by going to her shrine and bringing an offering of Nightshade, which, as an alchemist of poisons, you will surely have. The ultimate reward for this is the Daedric artifact, the Ebony Blade. Thematically, I think it's very cool for this character. It's a katana, so benefits from our strength stat rather than our agility, but it has an absorb health enchantment of 8 points and silences for 8 seconds. It's a cool thematic pick for this cunning Hlalu character and a worthy weapon for his toolkit. As I mentioned in the role-playing section, in general, it is on theme for this character to go about acquiring Daedric artifacts and hoarding these great tools of power in his mansion in Skingrad. But most importantly, for the mid-game, it's time to talk skills and spells. Restoration is very useful, and I will admit, I did spend a little chunk of time boosting it to higher skill levels with Fortify Magicka, Fortify Intelligence, and Fortify Restoration skill spells. Now, Restoration has incredible applications like we've discussed previously with the Fortify Mercantile trick, but for our purposes, I actually end up creating a spell called Assassin's Cloak, which casts invisibility for 20 seconds on self, Fortify Sneak for 30 points, and Fortify Blade for 30 points, all for 20 seconds. This really helped by functionally allowing us to attain the blade damage of an expert or more activated every time we go invisible. You can play around with this kind of formula, and to be honest, perhaps the sneak isn't even needed. However, I liked it for the moments after invisibility was broken, but you still had the Fortify Sneak going to help you stay hidden in the moments before you recast the invisibility. But if I was efficiency tweaking the spell, you could probably remove Sneak. I'll also mention that you can reduce the invisibility duration too, but at this point, around the middle of the mid-game, I just found that the increased Magicka cost of 10 seconds invisibility to 20 seconds just wasn't that much of a punish. I'd highly recommend saving before you make your spell and sort of play around and tweak it to your needs, but this worked for me. I also created a slightly upgraded version of my Spider Bite spell, aptly named Deadly Spider Bite, which has 100% weakness to poison for 20 seconds and paralyze on touch for 5 seconds. Towards the latter part of the mid-game, I also started training my destruction quite a bit. There is a very accessible way to boost it as a Dunmer by using self-immolation spells, meaning fire damage on self. But because of our 75% damage resistance as a Dunmer, and in my particular case 95% because of the fire resistance enchantment on the Greaves, training this was very easy. Just pump a few spells, then sleep when your health is low, and repeat. I found this was needed because destruction damage alone wasn't really the central part of the playstyle, so I just didn't end up leveling it as fast. And if you didn't know, what determines a custom spell's actual school is determined by what effect costs the most Magicka in the spell. This is base cost. So our Spider Bite spell may have weakness to poison, which is destruction magic, but proportionally, the paralyze effect costs a lot more, and so the spell is classified as an illusion spell. Anyways, we want to make ourselves some nice destruction spells that can come in handy when trying to deal with certain enemies. I made a simple combination element spell called Spite of Hlalu. It comes with 20 points of shock damage and fire damage for 2 seconds on touch, along with a weakness to fire, shock, and magic, 100% for 5 seconds each. This is quite the powerful spell that can help you when you're forced into open combat, or just when you want to quickly shut down an annoying foe, perhaps one with poison resistance or a ton of armor. I also made a target spell called Mephila's Bolt, which did 20 points of shock damage for 2 seconds with a 100% weakness to shock and magic for 5 seconds. Just some extra tools for the Nightblade. Finally, I'll also mention that with such high restoration skill, I also made myself spells like Tong Arts, which increases athletics and acrobatics by 100 points each for 10 seconds, and speed for 50 points for 10 seconds, just for some fun traversal when needed. Okay, so now we're getting into the late game and we can start finishing off our attributes. It's very straightforward leveling from here. Continue putting the +2s into strength, finish off willpower bringing it to 100 by level 22, and then from then on your +5s will be going into speed and endurance. By level 28, I had 74 strength, 100 intelligence, willpower, agility, speed, endurance, and then 30 personality and 50 luck. But that's a sense of progression with attributes. Let's talk gear. I lucked out big time and found a highly sought after piece of loot while doing the final Thieves Guild quest, the Necklace of Swords, which offers a 33% reflect damage on self and Fortify Blade by 25 points. Now, I will say in general, it's likely that your raw blade skill isn't maxed at this point. My raw skill was only in the 60s range at that sort of level 20 to level 22 kind of time, and this is mainly because you just don't get that many hits. It's usually a stealth kill or poison takes care of the rest, and so it's advantageous to boost our damage artificially with a spell. Like I mentioned in the mid-game section, the Assassin's Cloak spell really helps keep that damage high, but of course, as we get to a blade skill high enough, the Fortify Blade will become redundant, so I've got some other options. Speaking of blades, by the late game you'll find many Daedric daggers, and I enchanted one with 100% weakness to poison for 10 seconds and I named it Spite, but I also often kept just plain unenchanted Daedric daggers on the side in case I didn't want to waste that enchantment. I was also rocking the Quicksilver Boots and a full set of glass, with the gauntlets being a Detect Life enchanted pair that I lucked out and found on a bandit. I rock the Archmage hood. I just think the blue and green go really cool together. You could, as you enter the Shivering Isles, just go after a set of amber and go with a black hand hood or something. But I just think that glass goes very nicely with a Dunmer character from Morrowind, and amber has such a distinct vibe to it. But there's another late game option that is very powerful, but looks far more low key. It's like going full circle again, back to the start of the game. Let's talk the Mehrunes Razor quest. I would wait until level 20 to do this for the best level version of the gear, but you can go to Sundercliff Watch, and in the jail you will find a Morag Tong agent whom you can kill and take his armor. Now, aesthetically it is essentially just leather armor with a black hood, but unlike regular leather, it has high armor rating, and its enchantments are pretty good, including things like 25% resistance to magic and 25% resistance to normal weapons, as well as Fortify Agility by 13 points on the cuirass alone. But look, it's not really the aesthetic I had in mind for this arcane trickster Nightblade. Also, it should go without saying that during the course of this quest, you will be able to acquire Mehrunes Razor, which disintegrates armor and has a chance for an instant kill. It's a cool weapon to use alongside the others. For myself personally, I ended up with a full set of glass minus the helmet. I enchanted the Archmage hood with a sigil stone that had shock shield, which drastically buffed my armor rating and gave me a 25% shock resistance. You could also do the same with fire shield or frost shield. I named it very cleverly the Nightblade Hood. I also used regular enchanting at an enchanting altar in either the Arcane University or Frostcrag Spire to enchant the rest of my items. I created 2 rings, one called the left hand and one called the right hand, each using a Grand Soul Gem to each fortify willpower by 10 points. I gave the same fortify willpower to my gauntlets, greaves, and cuirass, totaling a 50-point boost to willpower. I also kept the Quicksilver Boots from the mid-game, giving me a plus 10 boost to speed and agility. With all this together, my willpower is 150, which makes a massive difference to Magicka regeneration, which is very good. And speaking of which, in the late game, I made 2 versions of a spell that I could alternate between as I pleased. One called Hlalu Cunning, the other called Hlalu Shadow. Both of these spells feature a fortify willpower of 100 points for 15 seconds, with the express intent of quickly regenerating the high Magicka cost for either spell. But the Hlalu Cunning features 100% Chameleon for 30 seconds, the Hlalu Shadow has invisibility for 20 seconds. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to each. Chameleon isn't as effective even at 100% for just general stealth. For example, with invisibility, you don't even have to be sneaking and they just can't see you. However, on the flip side, 100% Chameleon allows you to pull off some of the double sneak attack type shenanigans. So honestly, play around with it, it's up to you. They're both good, but I'm going to be honest, I do prefer invisibility, being cheaper, and by this point in the playthrough, I was just so accustomed to the invisibility on and off playstyle, so really play around with it, it can come down to personal preference. But ladies and gentlemen, that just about covers it. That was the Nightblade build, a cunning arcane trickster of poisoned blades and silver tongue. Enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, guys. It's been so much fun diving into Oblivion Remastered and all the fantastic changes it has brought to the leveling experience. Subscribe for more Oblivion builds, many more to come. Thanks again. My name is Scott from Fudge Muppet, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.